The Chicago Blackhawks have had some surprising players break out with Rockford in the AHL this season, and there's some players that you probably didn't think would actually break out. So we'll be going over who these players are in this video, but before we get into it, we noticed that 96% of you guys are not subscribed to the channel, so if you're looking for a spot to get all the news from your Chicago Blackhawks and the rest of the NHL, you're in the right spot. Make sure to stay a while, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on any of the major news. But like I said, there have been some prospects in the AHL with Rockford that are breaking out, quite surprisingly. Some players that I would say a lot of people didn't think would actually be breaking out. But we're going to be going over these players here now, and they're pretty good, I'll say. Ryder Rolston, Jalen Luypin. From what we've seen so far, which for us, it's pretty hard to get to watch AHL games, but they've only played 2 games. From what we've seen, they have looked pretty good. Both these guys have had some experience in junior and in college, so they're there, they're ready, they're getting up in the to a potential NHL level. We'll be going over their points and everything. I have a video of the goal that we can put in right here.
Rolston doesn't have any points yet. Has produced a couple of scoring chances, and there he capitalizes on one. Oh, it's the reverse jinx. Ryder Rolston gets his first pro.
On the play, both prospects got their first points of their professional debut. Ryder Rolston, who had a pretty good team there with him, and the one you can see highlighted, the 2018-19 Under-18 U.S. National Development Program. Guys there like Boldy, Zegras, Jack Hughes, Cole Caulfield. So he's not shy of names there, putting up nearly a point per game. That's something that is pretty exciting, I guess you can say, playing with those guys at a lower level, being able to keep up with them. And for the Blackhawks fans, got his first goal on that play, as you've seen there with Rockford in his professional debut. Went with Notre Dame as well, one of the top schools in the country for college hockey. So pretty good, stuff you can, pretty good game you can say there. As well as Jalen Luypin. I'm not really sure how to say his name, I do apologize. Pretty much point per game there as well in the AHL with the Edmonton Oil Kings and Tri-City Americans. Played in the playoffs last year, but also his regular season debut with the Rockford IceHogs. But Nick, I want to ask you a question here now. How important do you think it is for the Blackhawks to have prospects like these who, aren't household names going into their rebuild with Connor Bedard and everything, since they do have a pretty old section of the team in the NHL, I would say?
Well, organizational depth is always important, no matter where you are in the stage of your rebuild. And we know they're just pretty much starting. They probably could have got a head start if they had to keep DeBrincat and Doc and trade away Kane and Taves sooner. But, they thought they were going to be able to go for it one more time when they acquired Seth Jones and they acquired Marc-Andre Fleury. And you know how that turned out. That was just a disaster. But it ended up with them getting Connor Bedard in the end. So how bad is it really? But who knows? They might have some more prospects if they didn't trade away those players or whatever. But anyways, I think it's always important to have organizational depth, as does anybody. You need to have players that are able to come up and fill in when there's injuries and, take the places of older players when they start retiring and they leave. Corey Perry, Nick Foligno, I think we were going to talk about. They're here now, and they're good for Bedard and the young guys that are on the team, like Reichel, but they're not going to be there forever. They have spots. They have spots in the middle 6. It might even be on that team and on the 4th line. So they're going to have, those are spots that are going to have to be filled. And you're going to need players that come up from the AHL and come up from WHL, QMJHL, wherever, college, everywhere. You're going to need players that come up from there. And when they do come up, that can actually succeed in that role. And to have players that are decent in the AHL, because in the AHL is probably as close to the NHL as anything is going to get. So you're going to have players that can succeed at that level. If you can succeed at the top line in the AHL, you can succeed in the bottom 6 in the NHL. So I think that's what we're going to want to see from Chicago here.
Yeah, right now the Blackhawks have both of these guys on the 3rd line. So being able to see the production they've made so far and not being on a top line in the AHL, it's a promising sign. And, it's very nice to see someone come from the organization, someone you don't expect to be, an everyday NHL player, someone who's like a diamond in the rough, I guess you could say, come up into the NHL and succeed. So I think both these guys are definitely some players to keep an eye on going into through the rest of the season. I don't see either of them making the NHL roster this year, even if there's a whole bunch of injuries. I think the Blackhawks can make a few more calls before they get to these guys. Now, unless one of them, is beyond point per game, nearly 2 points per game, you may see them come up in the NHL, but I don't really see that happening this year yet. Major things to keep an eye on, though. I think both these guys can succeed by the way they've been playing. Now, obviously, as well, it's only a small sample size. 2 games, a 7-2 win, and a 7-2 loss, I believe it was. So, we're going to have to see how this progresses throughout this season because, they're not going to be doing this every game. They're not going to be getting high scores and high scores against. But promising sign, as well as another promising sign, the goaltender, Drew Commesso. In his debut, he looked fantastic, I gotta say. And that was the 7-2 win, I believe that one was. And, 34 saves, an assist. I'm not sure if that's a stat that's ever been tallied. It's an assist for a goalie in their first game, in his professional debut, and his first professional win. And, we've seen him, he's not a household name, but he's a name a lot of people would hear more so playing in the international games, played in the Olympics, played, I believe, in the World Juniors that got canceled a couple years ago. So he has that NHL experience with some everyday NHL players now, and he's a name that a lot of people, I'm sure, have heard, and he's a very exciting goalie to come up because you can't have too many goalies. It's obviously a thing that, you can't have too many of. If you do, you can obviously trade them. Florida did that a couple years ago, and it showed that it worked. So you can see his stats here as well. U17, the Olympic World Championship, the development program, not the same year as Boldy, Zegras, Hughes, Caulfield. Those guys, I think it was a year after. But, he's been good pretty much his entire career. He's been very consistent. Had an assistant captain with Boston University last year. It's something to take note of, I guess. But he's been very solid in his career, in his semi-professional career with the U.S. development program, Boston University and the international. So, Nick, tell me, what do you think about having extra goalies? Well, I know they have Arvid Soderblom, who's another good goalie, but Peter Mrazek, he's in the NHL as well. Obviously, he's not really a household name. We've been saying household names a lot. He's not the household name for the right reason. He's been pretty spread out among his career, but he's not bad. So what do you think about Drew Commesso maybe, seeing a few games this year if it do come down to maybe an injury or something here or there?
Well, I don't think it hurts to bring up any players, never mind even a goalie, toward the end of the season and give them a few games when it doesn't really matter at that point. Obviously, Chicago's not going to make the playoffs this year, but to have the last 10 games, you're going to see your university kids come up. You're going to see a few guys come up from the AHL. Some players are kind of banged up and don't really want to play the last few games, or the team doesn't really want to play them the last few games. I think that'd be nice. And I mean, speaking of depth, you can never have too many goalies in your system. There's not such a thing, right? And like you said, if you do and eventually it becomes a problem, you need to have, this guy needs an NHL spot, the other guy needs an NHL spot, and there's a third guy needs an NHL spot, you can trade him for some assets later on. So it's never a problem to have too many goalies. Now, as a Montreal Canadiens fan, it's very important to have goaltending depth, even when you have a guy as skilled as Carey Price was. You saw when he got injured there, that 1 year Montreal went 10-0 at the start of the season. He got injured, and we missed the playoffs after going 10-0. And it was because we didn't have goaltending depth. We didn't have guys that were down there that could come up and play in a starting role. And that just goes to show you can have the most talented goalie in the NHL, and if you don't have enough depth behind them, your team is not going to succeed. So, like you said, you can't have enough goaltending depth.
Yeah, one thing that came to mind, the first thing that came to mind when you said that, was the Vegas Golden Knights in their first season when they went down 5 or 6 goalies going into the playoffs. I remember Oscar Dansk coming in when nobody knew who he was, but it's something that, like you said, you can't have enough goalies, whether you need to trade one of them, send some down, just like Buffalo this year as well.
Vegas last season. Last season won a providing 4 or 5 goalies throughout the season, right?
Yeah, now it worked for them, but
when you had to have 4 or 5 goalies throughout the season that you could win a Stanley Cup that same year. It was phenomenal to watch, actually. And now, obviously, they've found Aiden Hill as their starter, but Logan Thompson is not bad to have either. And, I mean, they had Jonathan Quick. There was a lot of goalies on that team, but, they had goaltending depth. It worked out for them. So, like you said, never too much.
Yeah, and I'm kind of on the same boat as well here with Drew Commesso. I don't really see him coming in to replace anybody in the NHL right now. You got to give him his time. I've always said this. If you go back to every video we talk about a goalie, I've said you don't rush them. You have to give them their time, let them work their way into the NHL roster if they can make it there, which I think Drew Commesso will in the coming seasons, but he is another player to watch on this Rockford IceHogs team. And that's all we have for this video. Let us know down below what you think of these guys so far, if you've seen anything else, if you watched them in junior, or in college. Let us know what you think of them in the comments below. Love reading your comments, but that's all we have for this video. Thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed. If you liked it, make sure to subscribe, and also make sure to like the video if you did enjoy. That's all we have. Thank you for watching. See you later.